All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the wasmCloud community meeting for Wednesday, June 28th. Let me go ahead and pull up the agenda here so that we can get started. We've got one demo as usual, and then we're going to get into a pretty meaty discussion around link names. And I think this will be a really fun one. We've had a couple of discussions in the community Slack around link names, what they're useful for, things that we wish they could do. So I think this is going to be a great thing for this discussion. Thank you everybody for coming on if you took part in the conversations on Slack. So just looking forward to continuing that. But without further ado, Taylor, why don't you go ahead and show off your system information provider? Should have permissions.
Yes, I appear to have all the buttons. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay, that's the one. Okay, so I have created a new, I've been hacking around this week, and I created a new experimental contract / provider that can be used for all sorts of purposes. I can go through some of the ideas here. But this is basically like a system monitoring thing. Now, I know that like things already exist. You have Prometheus, you have different agents you can run, all that stuff. I get it. So this was just toying around, but it is interesting on how it integrates into the wasmCloud like ecosystem. So this new contract is a simple thing that I'm actually going to pull over my code so I can show some of this. And so it's a really simple interface that just says like, hey, I have this handle metric event that an actor can implement, and it and it has the actual metric event. Right now, it's super simple and straightforward, but it has system metrics that right now are sent, which are your classic ones like CPU, swap, memory, just the super basic stuff. We can add, I'm envisioning in the future we could add things like data about the host itself, about like whatever we want to add on. I mean, it already has the ability just to add in arbitrary data if you want to inside of a contract. So basically what this thing does is you can set it up so that it can grab from any data source and send it in. So you could have it running and it could be collecting the data from the host, which is the example, the data from the thing it's running on, which is what I'm going to show. But you could also theoretically do this by querying Prometheus or whatever you want to do, and then using that data to trigger conditions through here. So you could have something that sends off the data, and then when the actor could then do something like call the control interface and start something for you, or update something in WDAM or something along those lines. So I'll go ahead and start these real quick. So we have from registry, we have, oops, I forgot to start this one first. I was going to start this one. And I believe it is, yep, 17.2. Thanks to Brooks for his awesome thing that keeps the stuff up to date now. That's messaging. 17.2. Okay, so that needs to start up. Now, my provider, I'm going to start from my file right here. And I need to do the provider. Okay, so that provider, what it does is on a tick, I think it's every 10 seconds, it grabs the system data from the thing it's running on and it publishes it. And whatever actor gets it can handle it. And right now I also have just a really dumb actor that comes in, and I can take it and it will just receive the data and republish it on Nats. It's doing nothing fancy. It's just to demonstrate that this all works. So I will start that up. Now, if I come over here, I can Nats sub on, I think it is wasmCloud, yeah, wasmCloud sysmonitor. Okay, so we'll wait for it for a second, and you'll start to see the messages come through. So long as yeah, nothing broke. Okay, perfect. Okay. So now we'll see that every 10 seconds we start to get this thing. It has my host name on there. It has a specific UUID, and then it shows me like my current memory and other usage. So it keeps showing me this consistently and keeps publishing to the topic. But the thing is that this isn't limited to one host. I can also do this. This is a second host I connected. second washboard. So I'm going to start from file over here. Come back and start the provider. Okay, now that that's going, we'll give it a second and then we'll start to see a new one pop up. It'll take about 10 seconds before it ticks the first time. So let's see. Wait for it. Okay, there we go. So you're starting to see we have two of them going right there, the two different UUIDs. So obviously this is reporting from me, which is the same system. But the whole point is you could technically start these on any host that will allow you to start it on it, that can measure the metrics, and then it'll send those metrics out to you. And then you can use those metrics to react inside of your actor to do something. In this case, I'm just publishing the information out there. Like I said, you could come in and so like, oh, my CPU percentage is over 50%. I am going to do X, whether that's you spin up something that you know how to do to spin up a new wasmCloud host. You could like basically put that into here, and it would do an actor to start a wasmCloud host, which would be pretty cool if you like create a proper contract for that. You can also use this to maybe like scale up or down specific actors or things like you could modify WDAM. This might be something we actually use as a data source as we do custom WDAM scalars in the future. Like when you can just bring your own scalar that you want to do, that's this type of thing that could be used here as well. So anyway, pretty straightforward, mostly terminal demo, but I just wanted to show that like it was a fun thing to try out. It's under my this code is technically all available under my GitHub. It's not in any way polished or anything yet, but this one I will actually send in chat so people can. Where did my? Can't find my bar. Okay, there it is. Liam's autopilot. That's not who I'm chatting with. I'm chatting with everyone. Okay. So I just put the link in there in case anyone wants to see the code and what it looks like. But yeah, I've defined it right now as an experimental. I put that, so I have like the .ex or the exp thing in the middle here, just because like I'm not sure if this is a bad idea, but having it be like a thing that publishes to an actor just when it wants to, it seems like a pretty fun idea. So anyway, there we go. Any questions? People want to see anything else?
So Taylor, this sysmonitor provider, does it basically just any actor that's linked to it, it'll just send the information to that actor?
Yes, that's exactly what it does. If you look at the code, it's actually really straightforward and dumb, but it just says like on every tick, grab all my linked actors and then sends to all actors. Okay. So that's all it does. And then, I mean, it's just gathering. It's using a nice crate that I've known about for a while, and then sends the data out. So it's not, it's real dumb. This provider is 146 lines, but you, like I said, you can make this a lot more complex. You could decide when to do it out based on your own monitoring. So this provider, like I said, could latch onto Prometheus, and then as it queries the data, it could say like, oh, I've hit a threshold. Now I'm going to send a metrics event, and that metrics event will get sent out to whichever actors are linked, however you want to do it, and then that actor can take action based on that information. So that's how it'll work. Like I said, super dumb, but it works.
You keep saying it's dumb, but it's already instrumented with tracing, so you at least thought about it a little bit. Is that just like a second reflex for you now?
At this point, yeah. And the library is already like included when you use the template, so I didn't even have to like think about which version or anything. I just pulled it in.
That's true.
Some tracing.
Taylor, what was the why did you build this? Like, what was did you have something in mind that you want? Like, was it custom WATM scalars? Was it like a personal project?
No, I'm working on a couple. You'll see a couple more that I might demo next week. I've been just having this itch to have kind of what I've been calling the util contracts. And I know like having a util folder is like where you throw the kitchen sink. And I'm not trying to do that, but there's just a couple like little things that I wish we'd had around. One of them I'm working on is I kind of want to do actor config, which should probably eventually be a built-in to what we do inside of wasmCloud, but I'm going to do like an actor config one. And the actor config one can, like, I was planning on implementing one using NatsKV and one using HashiCorp Vault. And I'm hoping to actually knock that out today. It won't be fully production ready or tested, but it will work probably. And you can use that to fetch data. I'm also working on, Brooks already, I think, demoed this, maybe, I'm not sure, but he created a cron provider, but you can only run one of them. A single one, because, and I was trying to see if I could come up with a distributed one, like a cron provider that could do it all across. So I'm just trying to create a bunch of utility contracts. And this is one that was out there. And honestly, I was like, I just want to do this for fun to see if I could do it. But then I ran it past people like Dan, who's our infrastructure director and lead over here at Cosmonic, and he was like, I want this. And I was like, okay. So I made it. So I don't know, like, if it, like I said, I know there's other tools that exist that can scrape system metrics and whatnot, but I think this one could be interestingly catered to wasmCloud, because it could get some wasmCloud specific metrics as well, like number of providers running on the host where this thing's running, that kind of thing. So that's my motivation here.
Yeah, I found that cron provider. I think it's still in a PR right now. I think because we were whatever, for some other reasons, but it's definitely not designed to run more than one, unless you like a lot of ticks. Well, thank you, Taylor. Anybody have any questions for Taylor on the demo?
All right, then I'll pass to weather with Brooks. Brooks, how's the weather out there?
It's fine. But we will go on to our next agenda item, which the rest of the call we have booked just kind of earmarked for talking about link names. And so, whether or not we use the whole time, we'll have a little bit of time at the end to just kind of discuss things in the WebAssembly community, but we'll start with link names. And I want to start with a little bit of an overview on what this actually is, because link names are actually present in each wasmCloud application, whether you configure them, whether you're configuring them or not. So, and you may have, if you're in the wasmCloud community, you've built something with wasmCloud, then you do know what a link definition is, which is a runtime configured set of configuration between a specific actor and a capability provider. And link definitions do two things. It essentially allows an actor to talk to a capability provider. It tells wasmCloud that these things are supposed to be interacting with each other, and allows you to supply some amount of configuration. The most basic example of this is our HTTP server example, where you give it a port or an address to listen on for HTTP requests. Now, whenever you create a link definition, you need a few pieces of information, which you may know of the actor public key and the capability provider public key, so that they can talk to each other. The contract ID, so that wasmCloud knows what types of operations are going to be allowed between those two, like HTTP server or key value. And then what's actually always present is the link name of the capability provider. And I actually don't know if I have a wasmCloud thing running right now, but I'll pull up a wasmCloud dashboard just to illustrate this. Each time you launch a capability provider, you have to supply the link name. So let me just moving things around. When we start something like the HTTP server capability provider, you may enter the OCI reference, whether you're doing it here or through the control interface, and just hit submit. But you'll notice this link name is always here, and it's just default. That is the default case to which honestly works for about 90% of the cases. So what I want to talk about is just why link names exist and when you may use different link names. And some of the things that I want to talk about from there are the examples that link names aren't really robust for yet, and some of the discussions that have popped up either in issues or in GitHub. or in Slack. So if anybody has any questions as I'm going along or has comments that they want to share, please feel free to just jump in, like raise your hand. But I'll go from here. So when we talk about link names, there is, well, Vance, you can go ahead and hop in now if you want.
Oh, sorry. I thought that's what you were asking.
No.
Well, again, I'll tell you my impression of this. I was a bit sort of violated the principles of least astonishment for me. If you look at the washboard, that the link table is suggests that it's indexed by link name. It's the column on the left, right? And so it looks like actors and providers would key on link name to connect, right? That's how this looks. That's the impression that it gives. But it turns out that that's not the case, and that you can just ignore the link name and leave it default for everything. I named all of mine because it helps to understand what's going on, right? But those names were superfluous. So
Yeah.
I'm just commenting on that's a new user's impression of this. That's what it looks like link names are for.
Okay. Yeah, I think that makes sense. And I think that there's, a certain amount of, if it works for the 90% case, then maybe link name shouldn't be exposed as an early option, being able to change it to something else. And for things like HTTP server, it actually doesn't matter, but for other capability providers, it could matter to the point where your application may not work if you supply your own custom link name. And so I'll talk a little bit about that as well. So while Vance was talking, just to get everything shown up on the dashboard, I set up the classic Echo app. And when I linked the actor to the capability provider, it was on the link name default. Now, the reason why the base reason for link definitions existing is for link names existing is so that you can run multiple copies of the same capability provider and provide either different configuration, provide isolation, or just have a separate instance of that capability provider. So for example, here we have Echo running with HTTP server default. If I hit localhost 8080, I'll get the regular Echo payload, which is just the same response or the same request that I sent. If I start the HTTP server provider on something other than default, we can call it something like inbound. Of course, they're all inbound. Maybe that's a bad example. We'll just call it demo, just to create a different one. We now have two instances of the same capability provider running. And when we link Echo to HTTP server, everything stays the same except for the link name. We have to pick the other link name. And what's unique about this is now we can provide a different set of configuration, like address 8081. So instead of having just one where we're listening on 8080, we can also set up localhost 8081. So we basically have two endpoints, and the response is going to be the same. We have two endpoints for the same actor. So you may want to do this in order to scale up capability providers. Like if we wanted to have some kind of additional custom load balancing in addition to what wasmCloud already does. And this is one method to do that. You may want to do this in order to define a certain set of endpoints. So if you have one HTTP server that's serving, there's actually a new feature that just got added to our HTTP server around making it so that you can only do read-only requests. So get and head, I think. You could have a different link name for HTTP server, like read-only, and then you could link to the Echo actor and then essentially have, it wouldn't be able to respond to post and put and all those types of requests. So there's the flexibility to define different configuration. And then there's also isolation, which is actually mentioned in the link definition documentation, which I can go ahead and send in the chat. This is the example that we have in terms of an outbound capability provider. So I call HTTP server an inbound capability provider because it calls an actor. Outbound would be something like key value because the actor is calling the key value provider. In this example, for two different providers, is that we have a Redis capability provider with the link name default, and then some kind of low latency in-memory cache provider running with the link name cache. And when you make a call to a capability provider in the actor sense, you can only have one link per contract per link name. And that sounds a little complicated, but really what it means is that if you're making a call to a key value store, you have to differentiate which one if you have multiple. So you can have default in cache, or the one that we bring up often is maybe secret with the HashiCorp Vault key value store. So you can differentiate those requests. One example that we've used before for NATS message isolation is to have one that's inbound and one that's outbound. So you're using two different NATS connections for that. And that is kind of an overview around kind of the name spacing that link name lets you do. So you can create that kind of flexible configuration. Now, this is good. I think that this covers maybe 95% of the use cases that we have. But we have two discussion points that came up recently around link names, which this one is in the WADM repository, actually, around an issue that we have. If you have one actor and a provider and two different applications try to define overriding link names or overriding link definitions, then we shouldn't just continually fight over that. And we've gone a little back and forth, but Lee had a great point here on their use case around hosting multiple apps on a single lattice. So you can't have different configuration for the same actor, the same provider without using link names. And what this ended up coming down to is that when you create when you're interacting with that provider, you have to use a special link name. They're not something that wasmCloud discovers at runtime dynamically. So discovering at runtime dynamically is a big one because we generally like to have those things, configuration, runtime, config, be something that you can do at runtime. But for actors, it is actually hard-coded in the actor which link names you're interacting with. So there's the issue of discoverability. And then there's also the issue, if we take a look at one of the other wasmCloud examples, of reusing the same actor with different configuration with the same provider. And the one that always comes to mind for this one for me is Blobby. Blobby is just a simple reusable, simple file server actor. It interacts with a blob store, so you can basically use it, link it up with a blob store, define where your objects are going to live, and then Blobby has the create, read, update, delete operations automatically included. So you could feasibly have the Blobby actor and a blob store that's running maybe with your local file system. You may want to host two folders in that local file system or something like that. And being able to do that with link names starts to get a little bit complicated. So I kind of wanted to lay out a couple of different examples. And I don't know if everybody who took part in the conversation is here on Slack. I think Lee may not have been able to make it, which is okay. We'll be able to send them a summary and everything, but I know that Vance offered a really good perspective in there. I actually think you sent the last message, so I'll throw it to Vance to share some of his thoughts.
Can you go back to your example where you showed the static link name in the actor?
Yes, let me actually.
So
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to see the code. You provided the code. You showed where it's supposed to be statically defined.
Let me see if I do have one that's defined.
Well, you just showed it. It was just on the screen, right?
Was it did I navigate away from it? Oh, it might have been this one. This right here.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I guess that was it. So if that were it, the argument to that function is a static string. But if it were a variable, then it's not static anymore, is it?
Right.
So I'm calling into question your statement. So it doesn't seem to me that there's anything preventing me from having an actor that is dynamically choosing those link names. Maybe it just picks a random one, and not that that would work, but that's true, is it not?
Yeah, the key thing, if you have this as a variable, something that you could pass in at runtime, is how you're actually passing that in at runtime to the actor. If it were on and there was one example that we talked about in Slack, if we could actually put that on the link definition, but there's no real way to give an actor configuration with wasmCloud. Each one is treated, there's no startup function. There's nothing that, you can say, hey, start this actor with this configuration. It's not something that exists now.
Okay, so if my actor is linked to the HTTP provider, and in response to an incoming request, my actor runs, and something in that incoming request decides my decision on what link name to use for a call to a provider, or right?
Right.
What is there something preventing me from doing that?
No, you definitely could do that.
Right. So it's not static.
It's not 100% static, but it does still require that. So in this example, here where you create a key value sender with a link and a link name, if you get that at runtime, so you just, let's say it's an HTTP, it's getting an HTTP request and it's interacting with a key value store. And as a part of that HTTP request, you give it, hey, talk to this link or talk over this link name. You can create a dynamic link using that. So you use the link name that you get in on the request. But what you do still have to have is that link to the running capability provider. And if it didn't exist, then you would time out or you would fail the request at runtime, which, all of this just comes down to, yes, it's possible, but you would have to make sure that everything is set up correctly at runtime. It just kind of it means that when you're working with some application, you have to be thinking of link names in every single request. Taylor, did you have some thoughts there?
Yeah, the big thing here when Brooks was saying static, I think we want to be careful on, like, we're not meaning static in the programming sense of the word, like in the code sense of the word, I should say. I'm saying that, like, anything that you have to choose from in the actor, any of the link names have to be in the actor when it's compiled. There's no way right now to get it that information outside of doing something with a contract and a provider. That's why I'm working on the actor config stuff for that reason, because we want to be able to say, like, hey, here is here's the config for my actor. I want you using this link name for this contract, or however we want to define it. And that's the difference here, is that, like, we're not talking about just like in a programming sense statically compiled. We're talking about that, like, it has to be in the actor somewhere. So even if it's technically a variable when you pass it in, that variable has to be populated with information that is statically compiled into it somewhere, like whether that's a list of options you provide at the top, or even if you randomly generate a list, those things have to be put together, like, in the actor without, like, any outside input. And so that's the kind of limitation.
I don't see that limitation. So what am I not understanding? So if I receive a call, like, from the HTTP server, and I get the name of a link, and I use that name, now I've dynamically chosen a value for that link. How is that? What's stopping that from happening? So if these link definitions are made after the actor is started, right, and that would mean that you could feed the information into the actor, and the actor could now know about the new link and now use the new link. Is that not the case?
No, it isn't. So links, the only things that actually receive the link definition are providers, and the system itself, like the hosts. Actors have no idea what they're, so receiving it actually doesn't matter. We use that trick all the time. Receiving, so like an HTTP server, you can use any link name and it'll still work, because the link name doesn't actually matter there, because all it's doing is saying, like, it's just linking it to a specific provider that started with that link name. That's all that matters. But to the actor, it receives it no matter what the link name is. So we do that to sometimes split between like two different HTTP servers. But the when it tries to call something, so if an actor tries to call a KV store, for example, that link name actually matters. And so the Brooks, it might be easier to show this. Can you take one of like the KV counter example and try linking it to like foobar instead and show what happens?
It's funny that's actually exactly what I was getting set up. And so, yeah, exactly what Taylor is talking about. An actor doesn't know anything about the link names that it has. What at runtime, it doesn't know what's successfully been established, what's there, and what's not. Now, and as Taylor said, when he said receive invocation, this like an incoming request, like the HTTP server, the link name is not provided to the actor here. Whether that's something that's good by design, or as Kevin put it on his to-do list for about 2 years, we'll kind of leave that one up to you. I think it would be better to have that information than not, where you receive it on whatever link name.
Just so we're not confused here. I wasn't suggesting that in my example. I'm saying that I would look inside like the JSON payload, and use that to dynamically choose.
Yep, totally understand. So you're talking about a situation where inside of this HTTP request, the body, there is something in the JSON that says use this link name, and then you use that to create the sender.
Right. Like if I have links to different KV stores.
Yep. Yeah, you can.
That would work.
Do that.
Yeah. So
I'm not confused.
You are not confused. Your scenario
I think that
is possible.
So I understand, and I think the talking past each other goes to here. I understand that the providers call the actors, and so in that scenario, it's not the actor who's controlling that link. Okay, got it. Right, but the other way, if I link to a KV store, for instance, and the actor's making that call, and it could then dynamically be choosing new links, a link that was only created a few moments ago after the actor was started.
Correct. But
sorry, I don't even mean started, because that may be too fine a point. I meant like loaded.
Yeah. The problem is that the actor would have to be explicitly designed to do that. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it doesn't feel as good as in terms of just interacting with business logic to use that dynamic link. There's no way of knowing if that request would succeed at runtime.
Well, it's important to understand what the capabilities are. So look, there is a question, and I guess I raised it, of whether or not a discovery mechanism is missing, or could be a beneficial addition. But the thing about discovery, registration and discovery, is that it happens at different levels. So you can't stop people implementing things from having their own application level discovery and registration, et cetera. And so I could use the things I just described to accomplish that. For the discussion that I think you want to have, though, we're talking about not forcing that and having a general mechanism.
Yeah, I think that some kind of configuration discovery that goes outside of the normal bounds of link names and link definitions would likely overcomplicate the scenario. It's like some kind of service discovery is out of scope for what wasm, like that kind of service discovery, I think, is out of scope for what wasmCloud wants to do here.
Okay.
So the specific scenario that Taylor asked me to show here was if we have the key value counter actor that interacts with, it receives HTTP requests, interacts with a key value store, then we know the capability claims of the KV counter is HTTP server and key value. And so we set up two different, we set up an HTTP server on demo and then a key value store, and we call it something like additional. We set up our own link name. If we link the KV counter actor to Redis on key value and additional, that's the other link name that we set up, and we say, hey, go talk to Redis at the normal endpoint, we go and hit that actor, it's not going to work. And that's because it's set up in, in code compiled to work with the default link name, which is just what we do as a default with key value sender new. And it may actually pull up the correct thing here. I'm not sure. I was going to just take a look at the code and show that under the hood, it's just creating a new one with a link key value. Now, I think essentially what something that Vance is getting to is that if you had this requirement, this issue where you need to be able to define something like this at runtime, then instead of creating a key value sender with new, you create a new one with a link that you receive on an HTTP request. And then when we hit this endpoint to send the HTTP request to increment the value in the counter, we also send along the JSON payload, link name additional. Vance, that's right? What you're thinking of? And then the actor would know to talk to that key value store.
Yeah, I guess so.
Okay.
I do want to ask Vance, I'm just trying to make sure I understand that, because I think you're approaching this in a different way than I think we've heard before. So I want to make sure that we're understanding. So like, what is the, I guess I'd phrase it as like, what are the shortcomings you're having right now, if any, with how the link definitions work? And like, how is the, like, what's the use case you're using for them? And maybe like if we talk about it in terms of use cases when we understand a bit better, because I think, like I said, like you're approaching it in a different way than we've seen it happen before, which is not a bad thing. I think that's a good thing. So I want to kind of hear if, like, what are the shortcomings, what are the problems you're running into here, and maybe work from those.
Yeah, that's an interesting question, an interesting perspective. And I guess what I need you to understand is my brain doesn't work that way. So I'm not use case driven, I'm capability driven. And so I understand what sort of use cases would be enabled by a capability. And so my main interest is usually capabilities, and use cases are a side effect. So I don't have a particular problem I'm trying to solve. The subject was raised and I'm speaking to it, and that's all I'm doing.
I just want to make sure we're addressing the questions you have here.
I think we've answered my question, and I don't mean to derail things. Please go on.
No, I don't think you're derailing things. I wanted to make sure we had answered those properly, because I wasn't sure if we had. And that's the whole point of this discussion, to make sure we have those.
I think we're seeing it eye to eye at the moment.
Okay, perfect. Okay, Brooks, what was your next point along the, like, what you wanted to talk through with this?
Yeah, I wanted to raise one more thing. This was kind of on, let me find the correct thing. This was along the same lines of if you're not doing that dynamic link name creation at runtime. So you're not getting that information from a request, and you are compiling in different link names. Let's say you have a strict set of capability link names that you need to use. So we'll use the example from the documentation around having a key value link for default and for cache. So you have something you're doing regular key value operations in, and then you have a different capability that you're storing the lightweight cache. There's no way to know from, just like we do know from the capability standpoint, there's no way to know what capability links an actor is going to need from the claims, something that's discoverable. And here, I'll make this a little smaller, something that's discoverable at like before you actually run the actor. So when you run KV counter and it says the capabilities HTTP server and KB store, the assumption is that things are linked on default, but there's actually nothing that is really saying that that needs to happen. Now, again, for inbound and outbound or receiving and then sending requests on your own, HTTP server doesn't have this restriction, but KV store does. So if I take a module and I like KV counter and I distribute it, if I don't use the link name default, that could be really potentially confusing to the person running the actor. It would just need to be documented. But I think Jordan brought up this example for an example that he had in Go with a key value store that he had linked on. Well, he wrote Magic Pony, but I assume it was something else when he's actually coding. And then an HTTP client link on default. There's just not a way to discover this at runtime. So, or, before runtime. So the next point of discussion around link names is really, if you have this strict set, we know this when we compile the actor, unless it's something that's dynamically defined, what link names it requires. So should that be present in the claims? Yeah. Hey, Maxim.
Hey, quick question on the topic of same discussion with Vance. Is it not possible to have a continuous polling of those names and just have them available when any any need arrives to utilize that, or this is not even a topic?
I think not in the way that you're describing. So the host and the capability providers know about what links exist, but the actors themselves have no idea what actually exists at one.
Okay, got it. All right, thanks.
Yeah. But that, I mean, that's kind of, I think, at the core of the that's kind of the core of this discussion, is that actors shouldn't have to deal with complex logic around what links exist or don't exist. They should just be written in terms of business logic of, I want to store things in this key value store on a link that I kind of know about. And interesting. So for the other question around discoverable link names, we did get Jordan in the chat who said yes, which of course. But I think it's, Jordan, feel free to, if you wanted to add a little more detail there. I'm not sure if you're in a point where you can't talk.
What was the question? I'm sorry, I'm listening to two meetings.
Oh, it's okay. So around the different link names and making it so that you could see those in the claims.
Yeah. So my point was, I can write an actor, right? And I can take main.go or whatever .rust, and I can take a hash of it. And let's just say the hash is like 3. I can compile it with different link names at compile time, where technically the file hasn't changed. Therefore, I would argue that the OCI reference is the exact same. So let's say I did compile like that. How do I know version 001 and 002, which in my head means, hey, it's not breaking, but it is breaking. But then I get to the point where what if I need multiple link names in the actors and I don't want to put like 30 of them in there all at once, right? So am I doing like OCI reference actor 1 and then 001, OCI reference actor 2, 001? Am I now maintaining OCI references based on link names? It just gets impossible. Yeah. So more specifically, right, if we pull up, can you pull up the washboard real quick? I'll show you my exact use case. My exact use case was go to link, hit echo as the actor, hit provider. So we shouldn't even see KV Redis there, right? I mean, in the washboard, it's okay because, I mean, this is a dev board, but when we start to build on there, someone builds like next gen washboard, we shouldn't even see KV Redis there. And then instead of like a link name default, we should have a drop down there because we know that that actor, it's defined. So that's kind of what my use case was, because I was trying to do exactly that. Filter on the providers it can and the links it has the capability to. And then we take out the entire necessity for that contract ID block, right? Because we know the provider, we know the link, therefore we know the contract. So right. I understand that not being a function of the washboard because this is like as explicit as you can be, but it kind of limits any like future feature development on, say, like a front end type thing. And also I don't want my OCI tags to be like 001 underscore link default underscore link foo underscore link bar, which admittedly I do have out there because the actors are literally the exact same. They just have different link names compiled in. That's all.
So Jordan, I'm probably going to ask you a hard question here. Would you need to have those different actors with different link names compiled in if you got those on an incoming request or something, like you did that dynamically, like you just had a variable that came in on the incoming request that you used?
I mean, maybe, but then if it's like an HTTP request, now I have to write front ends that include this random header. That's just like that now becomes a wasmCloudism, and I want to avoid wasmCloudisms, right? Because I want to be able to take my UI, have it an actor, and then still be able to put it on I don't know, an EC2 somewhere and not have like wasmCloudisms baked in.
Yeah, so you can just have a service or a front end that just makes the HTTP request. It doesn't have to add in that.
Yeah.
One thing that came up in the Slack around this is maybe having the actor be able to know about incoming link names can be a partial solution to this problem. I think there's still a problem set that it's not, but if we have something like key value counter and we send in, okay, I'll actually start something that would better show this off. This really gets down to what we want to isolate within a single lattice. But if I linked key value counter to the demo link name HTTP server, and that's all fine, then maybe I could pull the link name off of that incoming request, basically from the wasm-bus context. And then so I talk to the key value store, demo link name. I think this is a pretty interesting proposal. I think it's something that you could, I'll start in two parts. I think we should include the link name on the incoming request because it just feels like more information that doesn't harm to have it there. But then also I think that this would, you may have more than one link name that you use in response to getting a request. And so it's kind of a slippery slope using this as a way to work. So, I guess I have one more point, but then Jordan, do it.
Is it my turn?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, but actor to actor calls break that if the originating thing comes from a different actor. For example,
Right.
So if it's coming in on the right from a provider, right, that makes sense because we know what link it came over. But if it comes over a provider to an actor, that actor makes a decision, sends it to another actor, and then that actor sends it out to a separate provider. Like, are we just going to start daisy chaining it all? Because I do have that example too. Where I don't know that. I literally have no idea how that would how I would dynamically allocate a link name at that point.
Yeah, it's a good point. Because you would have to just basically pass that around or pass your own some kind of value.
Yeah.
So I know that we're kind of approaching the end of the hour, so I want to try to wrap this discussion up. Thank you so much, Jordan and Vance and Maxim and Taylor, everybody for hopping in on this and talking, whether it's around the specific use case or what you could do from a capability perspective. It's really important around link names and how we may want to improve them. I think there's still some things to iron out around dynamically finding link names or dynamically getting that information at runtime that feels very specific. And we, there's an example I know that we've used it for around a lattice controller being able to get the lattice ID on the request. And then that's how you can work with it. But the only, I think there's more discussion to be had there, or maybe a really concrete use case where this is something that we need something special built for link names. But what I do think we should do, and I don't know if this is something that would be an extra tag or something that's core to the capability claims themselves. I think it would be great to include the link name information in the claims. And I think if it's something that's dynamically configured, or maybe by default, we have like a little link name star or something like that, that's the status quo. Or if you don't specify it, then it's just default. Or if you don't specify it, it could be all of them. Not sure which one. That would probably come out in an RFC. But I think if you are using an actor, you should be able to know what links it needs to be able to succeed, run, do its job without having to go inspect the code. You should be able to know that from the module or from the claims itself. So that will have to be added in, there's a couple different places, but I think that would be a certainly nice quality of life improvement in order to make that work. Jordan, I think I may need to follow up with you to see if that would even work for your use case, because you might need to have, the exact same actor with different link names. Closed source actors where you distribute just the WebAssembly module would fall under this specifically.
But even Blobby falls under that. Like, the thing is Blobby is a perfect example. We want that to be able to, you can plug it into two different backends, and that's a different link name. And so to be able to talk to one S3, like this, the S3 blob store versus, like something that encrypts it or a local one, you have to have two different link names. And so like being able to know like what the link name should be for your configuration for the actor is pretty important.
Yeah, very true. Okay, well, definitely more to consider there. We'll kind of follow up with the notes in the community. We'll follow up with the notes in the community call around how we can proceed in adding that kind of things into the claims. And then I think we can keep using Blobby as a great example. What if I wanted to use Blobby with 2 different blob stores and then go from there?
We did have a question that's a pretty quick hitter, Brooks, before we tie up. I want
Oh,
to
yeah.
make sure we got someone from one of the stream sources asked about, do I need to use Rest to know Rest to use little blobby tables? Glad you're using its proper name. Sounds like a nice utility to sync a DB table to a bucket. It is meant to be extremely flexible, and you don't need to know Rust to use it. So that's you can just link it in. That's actually the whole kind of selling point, is that the business logic can be written in whatever, and we're even getting closer there. Bailey's been demoing some of that, and I think it's going to be demoing some more in coming weeks about how any language can do this. But it doesn't matter what the language is. It'll pull in. You just know that it has an API that it exposes, and then you can call it just like anything else. So there's your answer to that one.
Pretty cool. All right, everybody. Well, I know we're just over the top of the hour, so I think we'll end it. Thanks all for coming to this community meeting. Next week we'll be back. To Tuesday is a US holiday, but Wednesday will be normal and as scheduled. So